to 93 Theory and Practice. This is exciting. Just want to first start this off by thanking anyone who has watched any of these videos, subscribed, liked, anything like that. I really appreciate it. Not that I necessarily do this for the likes or anything, but it's nice to know that at least when you are putting something out, there's maybe a couple people out there that are at least listening. So it's reassuring to know that the message isn't going out silently, at least for eternity. So thank you, everyone, earnestly. And I encourage anyone, if you have questions, comments, even if you have information, like a book suggestion, or anything like that. I mean, I appreciate it. I am not a master. I am the lowest on the totem pole you could possibly imagine. So, this is all a community here. This is what I want to start. This is what I want to be a part of. That's already out there. Is the community of mystics, community of seekers out there that just want to help each other out. So today's podcast, we're going to be talking about we're going to talk about the four realms of Kabbalah. So primarily, when we learn about the tree of life, we get the basic structure of the 10 spheres and the 22 paths, and how all of those correspond, interject and work with each other. We learn about the elements as they formulate down the tree of life, which then gives us the structure of polarity on the tree of life. We also get the pillars come from that as well, Yakin and Boaz. It further unfolds itself. So it starts off as just memorizing or learning about 10 spheres, then it moves up to 22 paths, but kind of all of this mixed in, you learn about the four realms, or the four levels of the tree of life. So these four realms, or levels, you can think of as being, I don't know, like higher states, or more energetic, vibratory states of the elements. And it's good. Sorry. Trying to make the camera straight. I don't know why it's crooked. Okay. Either way, there are four realms. So in each one of these realms corresponds to one of the letters of the name of God Tetragrammaton. So Yod He Vav He. We've spoken on this in a previous podcast. I encourage you at this moment, if you want to get a little bit of background on that, go ahead and refer back to that video. I believe it was video 3 or 4. I'll have to look. I'm sorry, guys. Maybe I'll put a little, like in this little square right here, I think I'll put a little number or something, so you'll know. Oh well. Either way, pause the video, go back, watch that, and then come back. But each one of them corresponds to the name. So Yod He Vav He. Yod would be the topmost point of the realms, so that would be Atzaluth. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. In a sense, that's kind of where we're gonna jump off from there, I guess is the best way to put it. But Atzaluth being corresponding to the Yod in Yod He Vav He, also corresponds to fire. So that brings us to basically the core of what we're going to be discussing today, and that's fire. But we're going to use my fire tablet, and we're going to use the tarot cards to basically illustrate this. We're going to try and make it fun, guys. So, what I probably should have done prior to starting this video is segregated the cards that correspond to fire, which would be the wands. So that probably would have been, quite prudent of me. But we do the best we can, guys. So as I clumsily start selecting cards from the deck, I guess I could just keep talking. So the tablet behind me is my Enochian tablet. So during the phase in my spiritual progression, of which I was deeply, or I guess you can say I still am a bit, deeply into the Golden Dawn system. And in that system, you create elemental tablets using the Enochian alphabet. So this is the one I made. And it's not to show off, guys, but I personally think it's badass. But that's just because it's all, that's the great thing about magic. You will create interesting things. You will create wondrous works of art in your own eyes. Now, of course, these things will eventually become imperfect and require modification, and eventually you'll replace it with something better, more in tune with Will. But this one here was kind of the pinnacle of my work in the South. Basically just continually doing the Watchtower ritual, pentagram ritual, hexagram rituals, until I felt comfortable enough to intuitively or inspirationally put it down into a medium, basically. So in this version, it was a tablet. So I followed a basic structure of including one of the, right there, one of the seal of the South, and then the Enochian tablet itself, but then I expounded on it, as you can see, to my own preference and correspondence, so that when I would attempt to open the gate to the east, the watchtower of the, or east, why am I saying east? South, then this would be a perfect way of doing so. But when you do this stuff in magic, it's kind of amazing, you'll get these weird inspirations that are kind of just triggered off of either you studying something or doing a ritual, or doing invocations of some sort, or another really good way is doing like spirit contact. Is a really awesome way of getting some pretty cool inspiration for doing things, specifically art and even poetry. But it's kind of cool how it all interjects. Like, you have these little specific purposes and tasks for doing things, but the energy kind of pulls you in weird ways and forces you to express yourself sometimes in interesting ways. So yeah, I got the cards separated. So the first card that I want to basically talk about when it comes to talking about Atzaluth is, of course, the Ace of Wands card. And I don't think that's focusing, so let's try this camera. The Ace of Wands card. In fact, probably what I'll do then is, with my computer magic, is try and put maybe just a picture of a card here or something like that. How's that, guys? We're adding some value to this. But the Ace of Wands card, as we can see, is basically it's a tree of life made of wands, or yods. So remember I said the Atzaluth is attributed to the letter Yod of the god named Tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He. Yod being attributed to fire, so it's basically, this is showing primal fire originating from the realm of Atzaluth. So this is the core igniter element of everything below it. So you could also view the Ace of Wands card as also being, if you want to say, the closest to spirit. So it's the element and the card that was first manifested down the tree of life from the most minute point of Keter. I don't know. As soon as, like, kind of like, as soon as the Ein Sof Bor manifested the known, at that moment, the first spark was the Ace of Wands. Sorry, I'm going to try not to get all weird, guys. I know I do repeatedly. Some of you probably appreciate it, and some of you probably hate it, because you're like, those correspondences are wrong. I think it's this. Cool. But we'll try and keep this practical, or at least interesting or entertaining. But it's in this card, it also formulates a tree, because you have to also remember that every realm of the tree of life, so Atzaluth at the top, Bria next, then we have Yetzirah, and then we have Saya. But every realm is attributed to an element, but each one of those realms has its own version of the tree of life. You can kind of expect it like this. There is a core tree of life, just like there is a you. Okay. So everyone is a tree, in a sense. When we do our magical practices, we are repeatedly imprinting upon ourselves the idea of a spiritual tree or an astral tree within our bodies. So specifically when we do like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, or the greater, we start Ata, Malkut, Vigabura, Vigutula, Leolam. It's basically you're formulating from Kether to Malkut to Gebora to Chesed, and then expounding out from Tifereth. You're formulating a basic tree of life. Whenever you do a middle pillar ritual, you're specifically invoking the middle pillar spheres upon your body. You're activating the chakra points, if you want to call it that, of the middle pillar, and then equilibrating yourself into a centered point of view. All of this, basically, is about building up the tree of life, which you can kind of think of it this way. Your astral body has a skeleton. Just like you have a skeleton, your astral body might also have to have a skeleton, I guess. That skeleton of your astral body is the tree of life. So that's the way you can kind of put it. So you can kind of think the body of what you're building in the astral realm, which will eventually become something cooler, is basically built up from the foundation, at least in this style and system, from the tree of life. So you can kind of think of it, the first inkling of the creation of you as spiritual being was the skeletal form of the fiery skeleton. So you were as soon as you were born, ushered from the world into Atzaluth, which is also Atzaluth, is the realm of Godhead, of God forms, or of God names, in a sense. God names are essentially the Atzaluth of Asaya, but they correspond to Atzaluth itself being the fiery component, the first willed component, the most energetic, being representative of the most primal energy of God. See how I go off the track when I start trying to get all corresponding. But you are this flaming skeleton coming out into the universe, into the black void of nothingness, manifesting just But that's basically what we're dealing with here. So, Ace of Wands would correspond to that, to the fiery tree of life. So, every card that then expounds from that, so the Ace, of course, is 1. So it corresponds to the Keter, to the point, the utmost point of Atzaluth. So remember I mentioned that there's an entire body. I feel like I need to go back to this point and finish it, because I started it. There's this entire body, which is the tree of life as a whole. So think of it like the native tree of life, or when you look up go on Google, tree of life, Kabbalah. You'll get basically a very normalized structure. So it will look something like this. Is it there? I'm sorry, guys. But it basically it has a very specific correspondence. So that's where you'll see like the has labeled out, and each Sephira will be a color. So Kether would be like this cool white, and then Hokmah would be like a grayish kind of color, and then Binah black, and then Hesed blue, and then Gabor red, and then Tiferet yellow, blah, 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 whatever. But that's a very normalized structure. You could think of that as kind of like the whole tree of life, kind of put together and simplified into a material symbol, of which you can then correspond to like anything. So it's the universal symbol of the tree of life, in the same sense that you as a person, being like, not you as an individual, but you as like person, other, you, also corresponds to a universal tree of life. So you could view others, in a sense, as a universal tree of life. But if you wanted to separate that, just like you and me and every other person are also made up of 4 elements. We are made up of fire, earth, air, and water. And these correspond to subtle bodies within our bodies, or subtle senses, or modes of consciousness, all kinds of different things. But essentially, you could break up the 1 into 4. And this is basically how we explain or extrapolate everything else in existence. And then it goes further to say that, yes, if the 1 can be viewed in this universal symbol, so this person, and then that person in our magical system is a tree of life, and that person can then be separated into 4, then the native tree of life can then be separated into 4. And then you're like, well, the perfected 4 is this Godhead Tetragrammaton, and then we would then attribute the separated, perfected aspects of man to this godly fashion, so that if man were to put himself back together, so separate his tree, correct it, and then put it back together, he would then be like God. So when you separate the tree, so 1, 2, 3, 4, Yod He Vav He, to correspond to man, so this would symbolize the will of man, the fire of man, the life, the vigor, the light. It's all of that encapsulated in man. When you separate that from him, symbolically in a sense, with the symbol of the tree of life, you get the first output is Atzaluth, fire. So when we separate that, each sphere is then a card. So in the tarot, this is so awesome, you get a nice little pictorial representation of what you're kind of learning about. And what's even better is Crowley then took all of these things, specifically of the Book of the Law, because essentially what the tarot is, the Thoth version of the tarot is a pictorial representation of the Book of the Law. As you read the Book of the Law, you'll kind of start extrapolating key phrases, and then as you hopefully would read, if you're interested in this particular deck, read the Book of Thoth. You'll get that, like he'll put that in there, like, well, this card, will correspond to this, and give you hints as to then build it off. But essentially, you could then take the deck and in a specific fashion start drawing cards, and then start reciting the Book of the Law, but in pictorial form. But also the entire magical system and mystical system of Kabbalah and alchemy and astrology are all encoded in the tarot innately. So not specifically in the Thoth deck, but the tarot itself is the pictorial representation of Kabbalah and alchemy and astrology, among a couple other things, depending on the tradition. But in this sense, the ace, the number 1, the Keter, which we know, Keter encapsulates everything but in its beginning, just like Malkut encapsulates everything but in a sense its end, which is just another beginning. So this would be the Keter, and then next we get the 2, and then the 3, and so on, and each one of those correspond to a sphere on the tree of life. So the whole point, though, is, as I take a drink from my pink cup, the whole point, though, is when you're delving into this pocket of knowledge, so when you're starting off and learning the elements. So specifically, when you start your, I guess it would be like a neophyte initiation, of which you're learning the foundations of your very being, and you're learning the foundations of your physical body, and in a sense, the foundations of your astral body, but that encapsulates gaining control or the powers of what's called the Sphinx. The powers of the Sphinx, of course, being to know, to dare, to will, to be silent, and what those, in a sense, what those phrases mean as far as controlling the physical elements of yourself and your environment. So when you decide to start delving into that and thinking, okay, so the first power, or whichever order you want to put it in, but the power of to will, to fire, so what it is to will. If you wanted pictorial representations of what that phrase meant and what the element means on a somewhat practical level, or a somewhat intelligible level, you would refer to the tarot card. So the Two of Wands would be the Chokmah of Atzaluth. So it would be the first, I don't even want to say knowable, but it's the first knowable in the sense that it's dualistic, that it has an opposite of which we could reflect thought on and then formulate an opinion. It's the first inkling, and then in this card we have dominion. So the Two of Wands would represent the aspect of will being dominion. So the first thing would be, I guess, I don't want to go into an interpretation right now, but essentially these cards start revealing, and then you have the next card, 3, which I believe is virtue. Yeah, virtue. You start learning about what in Atzaluth, how Bria acts. So in the realm of fire, or not Bria, how Binah acts. So what that primal fire of Yod, of the Yod He Vav He, of the man, that first inkling of will, that when it starts to begin to manifest and then gets into the sphere of form giving, then in a sense that's how it acts, virtuous. And it's then your job to then, in a sense, extrapolate the truths or the correspondence and meanings of that from there. Now the next thing I guess we can touch on is how this corresponds. We then have, we know that when we do our rituals, the rituals will almost always have directions. So and those correspond to the directions of the earth and the heavens. But it's the cardinal directions, and we know that the cardinal directions are often correlated to elements. Traditionally, in like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, the directions were east for air, south for fire, west for water, and north for earth. Whenever you would do your hexagram rituals, this would change and then become east for fire, south for earth, west for water, and north for air. So there was like a shift, a weird transition. If it doesn't make any sense, try this. Make a diagram on a piece of paper. So do like on the bottom of the piece of paper, make a cross, and then do your directions as normal. Draw a line, and then do the same thing, but with the other directions for the for your hexagram rituals. And then imagine that that's a mirror. And then use your artistic skills to then draw a unicursal hexagram, kind of right in the middle. So the line would be the middle point. So try and impose a universal hexagram, and you'll come to understand the micro-macrocosm transition of the elements from above the abyss to below the abyss, or from Atzaluth Bria to Yetzirah and Asaya. But shh, that's just a tale. Just the tale. Now, we also learned that, so on these trees of life, we have directions as well. So when we do our pentagram ritual, we are on the intersection of Samek and Peh. And that when we're looking there, if we're looking to the east, we're looking at Tifereth. If we're looking to the west, we're looking at Yesod. If we're looking to the south, to our right, we are looking at Netzach. And if we look to our left, we're looking at Hod. And then we attribute elements to those directions, and then we say that those spheres are then in that elemental phase. But that depends on what realm you're in. But there's directions in this, and then there's also, in a sense, those directions ultimately correspond to higher spheres. But either way, so we get like the king or the knight, we get the prince, the queen, and then the princess. In some decks, it's like the king or the knight, the page, the queen, and then the princess might be like a knave or something. I don't know. There's some weird decks out there. But the titles may change, but essentially, when you think of them archetypally, they're all kind of the same. But these correspond to the directions, and these also correspond to seasons, and what have you. But specifically in beginning phases. So specifically when you're kind of starting off. So I would say like neophyte grade, zealoter grade, when you're very much specifically dealing with elements. So like in one sense you're dealing with the very physical output of the element, and on the other you're dealing with specifically the astral aspects of the element. So how that element corresponds to your astral body, and then how you build the astral body through interjecting and working with those elements. So particularly these phases, because once you get up from there, you're very much dealing with an element specifically. Yesod is actually the first sphere in which you start really dealing with the elements in a very much more active way, because you're dealing with the astral. But it's still balanced. Being on the middle pillar, you're still, in a sense, trying to invoke the elements or formulate the elements in a balanced sense. But once you start going into the next grades, practicus, or whatever, then you're in an imbalanced sphere, so the elemental balance shifts in one way. But at least these two grades, you're studying things from a very balanced, or interacting, hopefully, in a very balanced manner. But we have to find balance within each element. So if you were to decide to go into the realm of fire, you would still need to equilibrate yourself into the realm of fire. You would still need to, in a sense, find your trajectory. So just like when we do our pentagram ritual, and we find our trajectory, and that's Semek and Pei. That's where I is. In the same sense, when you enter the realm of Atzaluth, you kind of, in a sense, need to do the same thing. So find yourself, if you wish, to be on the intersection of Semek and Pei, but you still have 4 directions, and those you could correspond to the court cards, in a sense. So like the prince, princess, king, and queen, or knight and queen. Or you would want to also view these to correspond to, say, the most archetypally God spheres in the Tree of Life. So Hokmah, Binah, Tifereth, and Malkuth. And those would also symbolize, also, this is where it starts getting really weird and complicated. I feel like I might be becoming weird and complicated. But within each element, so now we have Atzaluth. Atzaluth then breaks down into 4 realms. So you have the Atzaluth of Atzaluth, the Bria of Atzaluth, and each one of those has, in a sense, like a little tree of life in it. But it doesn't go that far. Then there would be way too many tarot cards, and it would just be stupid. But you could view, like here I have the Prince of Wands. This could be viewed as the Yetzirah of Atzaluth, as displayed as kind of like a person or a personality. So that's this. The Queen of Wands would be the Bria of Atzaluth. So this would be in the realm of fire, whatever conception of water there possibly is, would be this. So you can kind of think of it this way. There's no actual water in the card, but it does represent, in the realm of fire, the aspect of water on fire. Or at least the Bria of Atzaluth. So it's in the most masculine, if you want to say, in a sense. Not with no moral connotation, but masculine in, I guess you want to say, the energetic sense. Realm, this would be the first showing or inkling of femininity within the fiery realm of masculinity. And how this is displayed as a personality in the Queen of Wands, which is also my card. So according to the tree of according to Kabbalah and astrology, this is me. I'm a queen, baby. But the Atzaluth of Atzaluth would be the Knight of Wands, which is so perfect of a representation of what a personality would be had it been just fire of fire in its highest sense. So it would be someone that's so gosh darn willful, you'd swear they spoke the universe into existence. Yeah. But this is kind of like this is when you start extrapolating these meanings to the cards, when they start kind of like making sense, or when you experience things in life and you're like, that person is such a Queen of Cups. But, so, yeah, I guess that's the informational portion of our podcast today. Let's move on. Let's do, I know I just opened a huge can of worms. I know people are probably wondering, wow, you brought that up to then go nowhere with it. Well, we do this to teach, but also share. So, we're going to move forward. So, we're going to do a tarot reading, because I haven't done one in a few episodes. We started off and then we stopped. I think in our first couple episodes, we even did readings from the Book of the Law. And if you've noticed, in being an astute listener, you would notice that we stopped doing that. Or I stopped. I don't know why I keep saying we. It's just me. I stopped doing it mainly just because interpreting the Book of the Law is not necessary. It's every person's job to interpret the book for themselves. If you wish to view a commentary, Aleister Crowley commented on it. So yeah, that one's pretty cool. But I kind of felt in a sense that yes, I would be reciting the Book of the Law, which is awesome because I am propagating the word of the law. But without just doing that, without then giving interpretation or meaning or at least trying to help understand it in some source, I just felt was just trying to, in a sense, could have led down a rabbit hole I really don't want to go down. So I encourage anyone to just read the book daily, study it for yourself, extrapolate meaning as it comes to you, or cast it aside if it has no value for you. Whatever. So yeah, moving on to our tarot reading. So, what we're going to do is, let's try and extrapolate. Love that word. Let's try and gain some wisdom, some knowledge. Let's see what happens. Okay. So, let's think of our intent. Alright, let's play a game. Let's play a game like there's a person. We're doing a reading for a person. And that person is about to start a new project. So that new project, they need an influx of focus, an influx of energy, and will, and the determination to do this. And they want some wisdom. Wisdom is Hokmah. Pokemon is like fire. Pokemon is the Yud. Corresponds to Atzaluth. Corresponds to the fiery cards that we just talked about. Whoa, full circle. So yeah, let's invoke the higher, and let's manifest something that we can hopefully get some cool wisdom from. So. Alright, 4 cards. They're going to correspond to 4 realms of Atzaluth. First card, we got the 4 of Swords Truce. Now we got the 7 of Swords Futility. The 6 of Discs Success. And finally, we have Atu 17, the Star. Yeah, these are gonna fall. But need like a little table. So, if we have this person here and they want this knowledge, and we've done this, so we will say that in the beginning, so our 4 of Swords, hopefully future me is not tired of all this BS of show the card. There will be a card here so that I don't have to hold these up all the time. But the 4 of Swords Truce would then be the first stage of this first stage. So we would say that there's a balancing act that must be performed. There are going to be 4, if you want to think of it, Syra being the realm of air, but air also being, in a sense, the very mental, intellectual realm. You could say that there's 4 ideas, 4 minds converging on one central project. So this central project could then be symbolized by the flower in the center of the cards, the 4 minds converging in the middle of the flower, perhaps to then, I guess, come together and see who's the ruling. You could say that this is a Jupiter being being Hesed, but also being the kingly realm. Jupiter being the benevolent king and benevolent ruler. So you would say this is a kind of like a peaceful ruling, a balanced ruling of 4 minds coming together to formulate this rose, this project. And then also being a Libra, this is again the aspect of balance, but also law and rule. So you could say the first card would correspond to, yes, when you start this project, you need to formulate a council or a board of directors, 4 minds who each one of the swords in the card are identical. So you would hopefully want to form a board that is of same mind, and hopefully of sane mind, and that all want to essentially come to the same point or ideal. This will be the beginning. Once that has been established, at least as an idea, you don't have to, right now, you're not physically manifesting something. Remember, we're dealing in this person's coming to us asking about what the first steps they need to take are. So this is the first step. You're not physically forming this board of directors, but you're formulating the idea of this, or at least the desire, the will to formulate a structured leadership, a structured head of your establishment. So next we move down to Bria. Now, whereas Atzaluth corresponds to will, so the igniting of something, Bria would be the counterbalance for that. So it's the watery realm, ruled by the queen. Bria is receptive in the sense that what is ignited in Atzaluth is then received and reflected in Bria. So it acts as kind of like the mirror that then reflects the intelligible data back to, back, which then formulates the intelligible data, then becomes Yetzirah. And all three of those then somehow magically formulate a Saya, the action of which is constantly being portrayed around us. But in this next realm, in Bria, so this is also a formative, so this is where things start at least getting their first inklings of structure, of formulation. Now we know that Lon Milo did this like really nice little Kabbalah video where he spoke of the four worlds, and he like talked about how like I would say I'm gonna put a link to it here. Future me, please put the link here, or not here. If I can't do it here, it's gonna be down there, and then that way you can click on it, because I think he did a really good job of explaining that. But in that realm, that's kind of the realm where you would get the blueprint of an idea. So the word, the desire, the will would be in Atzaluth. And in the next realm in Bria, you would have like the archangels drawing up plans for it. That's a really good kind of allegory. Simplistic allegory, but your brain holds on to it really easily. But now we're in Bria. So this is where, okay, that's the desire to formulate this council. So now we're in the okay, what's the next step from there? So once this idea of the council is established, we now find ourselves in the Seven of Swords. The Seven of Swords being Netzach of Bria, in a sense, our realm, where we're dealing with, of Atzaluth, but essentially we're still dealing with Yetzirah now. So remember, we decided to formulate a council of four, but to use the idea of it. So being the cards, it's still a mental conception. So we're still dealing with that mental conception. So in the formulation of that mental conception, we have Netzach, which would represent the aspects of attraction, in a certain sense, desire, but also the modes of like fertility, abundance, things like that. Now Netzach is also a fiery card, in a sense that when the element kind of plops its way down the universal tree of life, it in Netzach settles in fire. Although if you wanted to view Netzach as being also an earth, kind of an earthy sphere as well, you can in a certain sense, in that how heat acting upon earth generates the nascent condition for life. Kinda. But here, basically, what we have is in this card, in Netzach and Yetzirah, we have the aspect of the moon, of Luna, acting on Aquarius. So that kind of balancing, vibrational, pouring out element, or sun. So here we have the swords are now different. They all correspond to a planet. So we have 7 swords, 7 planets, which is kind of cool. Netzach, the septagram of Netzach is a perfect little symbol for the planetary forces in an active sense. So we know like Tifereth, in a sense, is a hexagram, which the hexagram also symbolizes the realm of the cosmos. So it also has all 7 planets, but the hexagram itself being a symbol of the sun, of Tifereth, because it's six-sided, Tifereth 6. But then some people will draw a actual little solar circle in the middle to illustrate that further. But in Venus, in Netzach, the sun is a separate entity. It is no longer the unifying force, because now we're in 7, we're an imbalanced force. The sun is now just another planet, but still exalted. But in this sense, we now have the 7 planets. So the central sword, being the sword of Tifereth, would be that ideal. The rose is also sacred to Tifereth. The rose is a symbol of the sun. The rose is a symbol of the sun's effect upon matter. Also identifies with, or the flower identifies with the reaction of matter to that play of the sun. So what matter then does to further that cycle. So we have our central ideal, which we began to formulate in the 4 of swords. So now in the 7 of swords, this ideal is being, in a sense, attacked, or the ideas of the other planets. But you can kind of also think of this as this is the phase in which you've now formulated your board. This is the phase in which you want to then formulate your counterbalancing aspect to your board, which is then maybe 6 or 7, say 7, employees from there, or people that then give you feedback, or some sense managers, or what have you. This, of course, within, when you know, like, you'd get the person talking and be like, so what kind of business is this? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that card, yeah, you selling snow cones. Yeah, that's lime? Yeah. But, so there, that would be the next corresponding sign. Now, remember, we don't want to, in a sense, if you want to, you can give moralistic interpretations to each of the cards. You know, like you could have cards that are upside down and say, oh, that's bad. The negative implication of that card comes into effect. Or if it's right side up, you could say right side up. Or yeah, if it's right side up, then you could say, well, the positive implication of this card. But I like to view the middle pillar view, which is this. This is what you need to do so that whatever result you like or is in accordance with will. So when you're kind of telling this person, you're like, now you need a counterbalancing force. To counterbalance this council, you need honest individuals who portray these virtues, at least intellectually, portray the virtues of these planets. So someone who's very Saturnian would be, at least intellectually, would be someone that could manage the money, in a sense, or the debts, the books. They could run the regulations, the rules, in a sense. They could be, yeah. And then Tifereth would be who you'd have like your main manager. So your shining example. CEO, I guess, I don't know. But I like that. That's how you'd explain it in that sense. But then you then also say the ruling aspects are the moon, Luna, which is the planet of flux. It's the planet of flux, of the changing tides of the moon. In Aquarius, which is also a sign, in a sense, of flux. You can kind of think of it like they both go this way, but when one goes that way, it goes the other. It's the balancing counter aspect. So the aspect of balance is still very, very much in play here, but because it's a Netzach, it's an active balance. It's a spinning balance. It's, in a sense, kind of like the balance in Chesed. Chesed is stability, but stability needs to be found in change. So you know that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is a revolving name. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is also the demiurge. The 4 of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh corresponds to Chesed, Jupiter, who is that ever-revolving sphere, in a sense, but once that is unified, the 4 of Jupiter becomes like the Aleph that spins, which is like the swastika. All that just trickles down to basically mean in the sphere below Chesed of the 7, you still have the aspect of that attempt at balance, but in an active sense, in an emotion sense, in a fiery sense. So this is all the sense of flux and counterbalance to what you have just established in the 4 Chesed, the sphere above it, in our reading. So it's all coming into play. Now, we like to form triangles, so we'll form a triangle that goes like this. So this is our 3rd counterbalancing force. So you kind of think is it the Hungarian dialectic? How does it say? Hungarian dialectic, whatever it is. But it's thesis, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. This is our synthesis card. And that's the 6 of discs, success. So now we actually have something manifesting. And this thing that manifesting is like 6, it's the Tifereth. It's the most ideally conceptual way of thinking of it. So this would, you could kind of think of it this as being the actual, like, now we have the blueprint. Now let's print it out, in a sense. So it's physical, but it still represents the idea. But then it also represents something that you can act upon and use to influence action. But then also has some sort of material value. So in here, the rose appears again from our 4 it appears again in the center of the card, except it's not. It is no longer being attacked by swords, but is being balanced by the planets. So in the 7, we had Tiferet being counterbalanced, but essentially attacked by these the 7 ideas of the planets. And then now, these planets are now in harmonious balance. They've been equilibrated, given position, given their proper authority, and now they centralize on the center Tiferet. So that sword in the middle, not that leader, now becomes a central ruling act or a physical dictation of which you now formulate the idea of your business or venture that you're deciding to start. This is ruled by, again, the moon, Luna, so this is still a fluctuating sign. There's still an aspect of change to it. With Taurus, which is also a very, it's the most earthly sign, so it's very material, but then Taurus also, at least in an intellectual sense, can symbolize fixed idea, or the concept of a higher intelligence ruling over a lower to bring about physical work and change. So like the idea of like a farmer will use his ox to plow the fields. He will do this by giving it a set trajectory and then also giving it repetitive verbal commands to then train the animal to do very specific tasks. So this would be symbolic of this is the dictation of the will to formulate our counsel. We've balanced the counsel with ideas. This is our perfected manifesto of how this project is to be ruled and led. How the will is to be dispersed throughout the kingdom. So that's what this card shows. So it's success. So essentially you tell the person, hey, as long as you did A and then B was done equally well, you experienced this, blah, 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 then C will be success. You will have success in at least formulating the first aspect of that. Now, you want to then tell them, now, this is what's the end result. This is the future, okay, in a sense. So the 3 cards would have been the immaterial aspects coming to play. Now, this 4th, corresponding to our he, final, Yorhevave, just so happens to be a he. I tell you guys, I draw these cards, I'm like, I don't make this up. I don't shuffle these cards in a weird way. It just comes out that way. It's kind of cool. If you haven't seen that, then maybe I'm just crazy. But finally, in our final phase, the actual material representation of what's actually going to happen, we have the star. Now, the star is also ruled by Aquarius, which we saw in our first he. Remember when we Yod-He-Vav-He, the 4 right here being the Yod, or I guess I just put it here. The 4 being the Yod, the 7 of swords being the next he with Aquarius there, and then it's kind of cool that our he final is also he itself. But essentially in this reading you could then with confidence say, as long as you carried all this out, this will be it. But it's in flux. So that aspect of the first hay where that the intelligible, so all your leaders are essentially going to have fresh ideas. And as long as you continually counterbalance that ever-revolving kind of play of establishing the 4, counterbalancing against that 7, to manifest a new successful rule of law, you will continually manifest a new star, or give light to the star, or allow the star to have light, thus bringing about a new entity. So essentially what you can tell him is the star represents an incarnation. Every man and every woman is a star. This is not me interpreting it, but essentially every man and every woman is an entity. In magic, you wish to create, in a sense, entities. You wish to create events. You want to bring about things, changes in your life. You could say those changes you could give life to them like entities, so like stars. In this sense, you could tell the person, as long as you follow it out, this pattern, this formula, then you will manifest a star, an entity, of which could then have its own life trajectory and mode of operation. Modus operandi. All right, guys. I think it's perfect time to come to an end of our video. So, as always, Do what thou wilt, true with the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. See you later, guys.